Hi, Priya. Welcome to the show.
Hey, hi, Brittany. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. You have your biscuit and your tea
I
already.
have very English. Yeah, absolutely. It's 8 o'clock in the evening here.
Okay, get the biscuit and some tea, and I'll be ready for the interview. And I'm like, oh my God, this is fun. Yes.
Well, women have to have their quirks as well. I think, as we were just saying beforehand, you need self-care. I mean, you could go
Mm,
ahead and build a whole fund and realize by the evening you haven't even eaten anything. And
yeah,
that's not great. You've got to look after yourself.
absolutely. Founders, listen up. You got to do your self-care because otherwise it all crumbles. It all just falls apart. Well, Priya,
Absolutely.
we love to kick our interviews off with learning more about the guest, like your personal story. So tell us a
Okay.
little bit more about, your background, maybe even your heritage. You are a woman who of color who's won awards based on like the things that the ceilings you've been able to break through. So tell us a little bit about your background, where you're from, your journey, and then we'll get to what is Goddess Gaia Ventures. But tell us more about you
Okay.
first.
Yeah, happy to. So, well, I mean, I am a woman of color, as you could tell. I grew up in London. I went to University of Oxford. I studied law. I came from a very modest background, loving parents, but they really encouraged me to work hard, and that kind of got me to Oxford. I got my great grades, and then I went off to be a lawyer. I was a finance and derivatives lawyer, and I loved that job because I ended up traveling to Moscow, to Kazakhstan, to Geneva, to New York, to Paris, came back to London, and then I was up for my partnership and I got cancer. And I think that was a really pivotal sort of point in my life where I was kind of faced with the fact of, do I want to work 90 hours in a corporate? And I wasn't married, I didn't have kids. Um, or do I actually want to have a life and live, basically? And it really was a very scary time. So I had a vulva cancer, which was really, it's quite rare, to be honest. So I basically left my job in 2 weeks, and I was in the partnership process. So that was kind of a bizarre thing to do because everyone's looking at me going, you're not well. Are you not well in the head? Is that okay? And it was like, no, you know what? I think this is the right thing for me. And I basically took a year off, got better, and then decided what I really wanted to do. And I love traveling, as I mentioned. I love meeting people. I was single and no responsibilities. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to be a private placement agent. And I had no expertise in any of this. I tried to get a job. No one would hire me. I thought, sod it, I'll set up my own company. And I did. And within 3 days, I got my first client. And I essentially spent the last 10 years taking very wealthy people with very clever ideas from UK, the US, and Europe into the Middle East and raising money for them. And I loved it. I built my team. We've had a great journey. And then I think when COVID hit, it just became really apparent that that business model doesn't work. No one was getting on planes, everything shut down. And I could have ridden it out. And I thought, what do I want to do now with my life? Because I'm 20 years in. And I thought, look, I've had the cancer. I had a really painful fertility journey because with cancer, there was lots of complications. But now we have a lovely 5-year-old boy. And I live with an autoimmune disease. And I thought, God, I cannot be the only woman in the world who has these problems. I mean, I know I'm special, but I'm not that special, right? So there's got to be other people who have this. And yeah, that's kind of the genesis of why I wanted to build this fund. I mean, I think it's my own personal journey and my own personal, health problems and heartache, and not actually having people along the way to help you as well. So, we're talking 10 years ago now. So yeah, I think that's kind of my personal journey to where I am today, and why I decided to, basically start building a fund, which is called, as you said, Goddess Gaia Ventures.
So exciting. Through your, medical experience, did you find that it was subpar, or like, did you not even realize it was subpar? You thought maybe this was the best that it is, or, but did you feel like there was a lacking and therefore you're like, yeah, one day that needs to get fixed?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think at the time So when I got my cancer diagnosis, I was so shocked because I was so young.
Yeah.
And it was by pure coincidence. I had a routine sort of smear test, and I was seeing the specialist. And it's only because I lived in Switzerland that they do these tests every year. In the UK, you do it every 3 years. So it was just random that I actually went to the doctor, and actually this got caught quite early on, because otherwise it really could have ended up in a different situation. But yeah, I mean, the subpar, I think, is not being tested enough. I think being misdiagnosed. I mean, my autoimmune disease, which is lichen planus, I mean, I think I went to 40 doctors in the UK, and in the end I ended up going to a homeopathic doctor in India who could actually diagnose me, give me some medicine, and then come back to London and find the right doctor. And the fertility journey, I mean, that was just crazy. I mean, my husband and I must have gone to 25, 30 doctors, spent nearly $90,000 equivalent on tests. And absolutely everything was just so heartbreakingly sad. Every person, oh no, you can't do this. Oh, it's too complicated. There was nothing positive. There's no positive reaffirmation that this is something you could do, that we can help you. And in the end, I found this amazing doctor who is the one of the early sort of pioneers of IVF, and he's a Black doctor. And honestly, apart from keeping me 2 hours waiting in his waiting room, was so sympathetic. And he just said, look, I'm going to help you. And virtually he had a lot of tests in the US. So actually it was his connections with the US and all that correct testing, which got me on the right treatment path. And I needed a different plan of estrogen and progesterone that a lot of other women who are going through this fertility journey didn't need, and how to measure that with cancer, right? So I basically had 5 doctors at one time, and I was managing my appointments and who's talking to whom and how much of this, when I needed to be tested. I'm thinking, how is this so crazy that we don't have an app or some technology or someone who can help me with this stuff? I mean, why am I doing it?
Like,
And this
a woman
is only
who gets
6 years
stuff
ago.
done. You manage people, you lead people, you get stuff done, you close deals. And so for you to find it difficult to manage it, it's like, how could a woman who's making minimum wage handle this?
Totally. And it's, it is, for me, it was so heartbreaking, like when I started thinking about this fund, I thought, I'm so lucky, I have been blessed that, like you said, I have my education, I have a great family, and I have that support, and my husband was amazing. But wow, it takes it out of you. And actually, while you're going through it, all you're doing is trying to figure out, how do I survive? How do I get to the end of it? But you're not actually processing the emotions while you're going through it. So in a way, actually, when COVID hit, I actually had first time to think in maybe 10 years and actually figure out what actually happened. And it really struck me that I got lucky, but why am I not helping other people get lucky? I mean, surely I should be giving back. And it just made more sense of why this all happened to me, because there had to be a reason, right? In my mind, at least. And I thought, well, maybe this is my path. And honestly, I have never thought of anything like this in my 20-year career. I have, always been very keen to be top of the class, make money, really worked in a male-orientated environment all through my career. And it's like a 360 happened. And it was the time to just, spend time to think and figure out, what do I really want to do? And then I started on this path, and I met people like you and other people. And it's amazing that energy makes you realize why this is so important, and why women's healthcare has been so underserved, underrepresented, underfunded. How is that even fair? How is that inclusive? Why are women of color not, there's disparities between men and women, but there's even further disparities between women and women of color. So it's like, how is this even acceptable into today's age?
How are we not all quitting our jobs, stomping in the streets, throwing bloody tampons around. Like, we need to go.
Yeah, totally. I mean, you get it, right? I mean, but it's sort of, I think as well, it's also a generation thing. I mean, when I was growing up, I don't know, you were just sort of told to sort of grin and bear it in a way, right? And that's not correct. And like as women start hitting perimenopause, menopause, there are a whole bunch of problems that start coming up. I mean, nobody knows what they are. We have no treatments for that. We're not even discussing it. And then obviously at the other end of the spectrum is things like contraceptives, sexual wellness. Why are women not given, I don't know, like a better understanding, a better lexicon, a better dialogue around that, so we can make more informed decisions about what we want to do? And yeah, I think my own journey just made me realize that, yeah, I need to do something, and hopefully we'll be successful in this process. But it does feel like a bit of a crusade right now.
Yeah.
Because honestly, having raised money for other people, when you raise it for yourself, you realize how personal it is, and you take it to heart, because it's like, do you not like me? Do you not like my investment thesis? Do you not like what I stand for? What is it, basically? And you just have to let all of that go and just say, no, I have conviction for what I want to build, and people will come.
Yep.
And investors will come. And this is a necessity in today's world.
Yep. Well, let's get into it. What is Goddess Gaia Ventures?
What is it? So it's a venture fund that invests at growth seed or pre-series A. It invests in cancer tech, fertility tech, well tech, and femtech. And essentially we want to build a cross-pollination portfolio of 25 companies and grow them to Series A. And the reason why we've chosen that part of the cycle is because healthcare for women needs extra runways. So if you think of venture for SaaS or fintech, every 18 months you're raising, great. But you can't do that for healthcare, because healthcare needs longer MVPs, needs longer pilots. It needs regulation in certain cases. So how can you fit in that 18-month box? So when we looked at the market and started mapping it out, we thought, well, hold on a minute. These guys have raised pre-seed, they've raised seed, but why are they struggling now? And it's like, yeah, well, actually they're struggling because it's healthcare. So who's operating in that space? Well, no one. So we basically picked up the phone to the Atomicos of this world and the Google Ventures and said, like, what's wrong with these companies? Do you not like them? I was like, no, we like them. They just can't get to Series A metrics in those timeframes.
Yep.
So it just said, right, well, that's where we'll come in. And I think with our skill set as well, I think founders at that stage, they know what they want. They just need a bit of rocket fuel, right? They need a bit of support, and they need connections and networks. So that actually plays to our skill set as well. So that's what Goddess Gaia is. And, it's going in at that growth seed, with a 2.5 million check, getting them to a supersized Series A, and then helping them scale to the US. Because the bottom line is, you cannot build a unicorn without the US market. So, that's kind of my personal view. And I think that works. I really do. So that's kind of where we are and what we do.
Yeah, I love it. Well, it's kind of interesting. You brought up earlier that your treatments really came to a head when there was a collaboration with US doctors and UK doctors, right? And so I see a kind of a mirroring messaging here, where there's amazing companies in the UK, but we got to link it with the US. Can you give our listeners a little insight into like what, how it feels in London or the UK in general right now around FemTech? Is there excitement? Is there confusion? Is there like, how's it feeling? What's the pulse of FemTech in the UK?
Well, it's definitely a buzzword, if that's the right way of putting it. But I think, and you're very famous, Brittany, as you know, right? And so there's two extremes, right? I think you have the FemTech of, I don't know, it's sort of like the pink brigade, as I call it, right? Some people who maybe don't take it, it's like, oh, girls are doing something together, right? And then you have the other end of the spectrum where it's like scientists, real science meets innovation. And I think that's the spectrum we want to play at. We want to invest in companies, Yeah, which aren't just creating communities. There's a place for communities as well, but things that are actually going to move the needle for women's health, right? So one of the companies I love, I mean, she has breast cancer diagnostics normally takes about 10 days, right, to get a diagnosis. And you only even know when you have breast cancer when it tends to metastasize somewhere else in the body, right? So she has, through artificial intelligence, created a solution where within 24 hours you can get the results, right? Now, just think about what that does to someone. Instead of waiting 10 days, you wait 24 hours. You have the results earlier, and those early diagnostics means better treatment, better pathways, better solutions. That's a better society. I mean, surely that's worth investing in, right? I mean, stuff like that blows my mind, right?
What
And
are some of the other investments you've made so far? I know that you've had some really awesome companies, so just
so there's another one
to shout out.
Well, you know them really, really well. But like, there's another like fetal heart rate. I mean, I love the founder who's basically put that together. I mean, it's a way of measuring through a D2C program, a D2C solution, the heart rate of your unborn child. Now, think about what's happened in COVID. I mean, most people trying to leave the healthcare profession, poor things. I mean, they've gone through so much. There's so many touch points in a hospital when you go in to go and have your baby's heart rate, monitored. You've got to get to the hospital, wait at the hospital, wait for the results, get checked out, come home again. Whereas this is allowing you to do the same thing at home, scan over the results to the doctor. So what does that mean in a nutshell? It means that less time wasted, as efficient or maybe more efficient results, less stress for the mother, better for mother and baby, less probably cesareans going forward, because there's a lot of cesareans that happen through stress as well. And, if you're a high-risk pregnancy, as I was, for example, I want to measure, I want to know my baby's okay. It was so important. And I was traipsing to the hospital for scans every week. And here in the UK, you're only allowed 2 on the national health, right? The rest you have to pay for. So you're paying £200, which whatever, $250, $260 for a scan.
Yeah.
I mean, that's crazy, right? Yeah. I mean, why is there not a more cost-efficient solution? Mm-hmm. So stuff like that, for me, it's not only a great investment that is scalable, that can make money, and a great founder and a great team, but it's also something that is impactful and makes a change in society. And I would love Goddess Gaia to be known for those kind of investments. It's, if you're going to build something, you might as well build something that's going to change the world. Otherwise, why bother building it, right?
Yes. What is your opinion for founders that are in the UK that are wondering, maybe they have an MVP, they haven't gone to market just yet? I talked to a lot of EU founders that are fundraising their rounds so they can come to the US right away versus launching there. So just in kind of any trends around, do you find that UK companies launch first in the UK and then they hit a certain point and then come to the US, or are they thinking about that from day one? Walk us through that a little bit.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. And I think like a lot of our partners that we have in the US, they've actually said to us that it's better to think about this earlier on, right? Because if you think about it, like the US has a payee system, which is very different to the NHS and incredibly different to Europe. So if you're building something in the UK, like Current Health, right, in Scotland, I mean, they've just had a great sort of round in the US. How does that product fit in the US, right? You've got to think about that while you're building it, because otherwise, all you do is end up kind of, what do you do? Land on the shores of New York and go, hey, I'm here now. My product
all the plugs are wrong, right? Like all the plugs are wrong.
Exactly.
The US is like, how do we plug in? I can't do it. Yeah.
It's not a plug and play. So I think it's, whatever you're building, it's got to be, you've got to think about who's paying for this stuff. Is it, so in the US, is it the corporates? Is it the individuals? Is it Medicare? Is it, what is it? Who's actually paying for this solution? In the UK, we have the NHS, which is, a government-funded organization, healthcare system. But then here we need to think, how does the insurance blend in with that? Will individuals pay for this solution? So I think these things need to be thought of at the foundation and the beginning. And so, you know, when you're building your MVP, I would start picking up the phone straight away, actually, and say to people, look, because it's much easier to change things at that stage than down the road, right? Because if your desire is to build a unicorn, you cannot escape the US market. It's you have to include it. You have to scale in the US. So surely it's better to start thinking about this stuff early on than down the road, and then having to rewind it and rewire it and start again.
Yeah, totally. As you're fundraising this fund, I mean, obviously I'm like totally convinced, right? In your investment thesis. I'm an easy sell, right? But when you're going,
you're one of our special advisors, so you better be an easy sell.
I'm sold on it.
I need you to be an easy sell.
There are, to the best of my knowledge, no other women's health specific funds in the United Kingdom. And so as you're going out there pitching this idea, what are some impressions that you're getting? And I don't throw anyone under the bus. It's not what this is about, but we know that there's a lot of people listening that are fundraising and they are hitting walls, right? And so I think it might be comforting if they hear that you might be struggling, give or take, you know, based on your background of being a badass financial fundraiser. What's your experience like fundraising for women's health?
Okay, so first thing I will say is there's a very different USP when investors speak to women and men. And I never would have believed it unless I was in the process. So, for example, when I have been fundraising for other people, they tend to ask men questions about growth and the future and your aspirations. I mean, sometimes investors ask us like how many kids we have, right? And so there's at least 7 kids between us, right? So that's, you know, like, why does that matter? Does it mean that you don't care as much about what you're building? I mean, they're very defensive questions, what we're being asked. And it's sort of like you're having to prove yourself and demonstrate you can do the job. Whereas with men, it's normally given that they can do the job, they just need some money.
Yeah.
So there is a big distinction there. I think also as well, I think there's just a level of frustration now in the market, especially in the UK, about women being over-mentored. We don't need to be of course, mentoring is nice, but you know, there is over-mentoring and trying to fit a circle in a square and a square in a circle. For God's sake, just give us the investment dollars. We will demonstrate through performance that we know how to do our jobs. I mean, I think that parity isn't there yet with men and women when they're fundraising. I think fundraising in women's health is also another roadblock, because some of the solutions that you're talking about, I think if the allocators are not near to the problem, they have less empathy, number one, right? 2, I think there's a shyness still about, an ickiness about sexual wellness, for example, or I don't know, talking about vaginas or talking about breasts. It isn't an easy conversation sometimes with male allocators. And it's not us who feel uncomfortable, it's maybe they who feel uncomfortable, right? And then I just think as well, a lot of people, and especially VCs, they build portfolios where healthcare is sort of the outlier. So you're not building a focused portfolio, what we are doing. So our aim is to build 25 portfolio companies that actually help each other. And that is very unique. Whereas most VCs, they just they'll invest in healthcare, but it's the outlier. It's one of many, many different types of companies. So that doesn't really lend itself for allowing the founders in that portfolio to help each other, right? Because if you think about it, you have similar metrics, you have a similar customer base, similar, ideas and values. Surely those founders can work together and actually create better products as well. So there's definitely that issue as well. But yeah, of course, it is so hard. I think for any emerging fund manager, it's hard work to fundraise, right? Full stop. But it's even harder, I think, if you're a woman, and I think it's even harder in women's health, right? That said, I think you just have to keep going, right? And that tenacity, it really will make you, because there are always ups and downs in life. Always, you know, in my career, I've had ups, I've had downs, right? And, you know, this, I just look at this as something that I need to move through.
Yeah.
And, you know, and it's the same with founders, you know, you have to believe in your product. And
Yeah.
you will find the right investor. It's a bit like a marriage, right? You're trying to find people that understand you, because it's a 10-year relationship at least. So that's quite a long time. And you got to work with people that you're comfortable with, who you trust, and who have your back. So yeah, maybe, you know, if I set up a MenTech fund, I think I'd probably get, you know, funded in 1 month, right? But the bottom line is, I want to set up this FemTech fund. It may take a little bit longer than I'm hoping for, but I believe that this is the right way forward. And I know exactly how well these companies are going to do commercially and financially. And there will definitely be unicorns in that portfolio, but I also know how impactful these products and solutions will be, and how much good they will do in the world. So that's what keeps me going, basically.
Love it. One of the things I love about your, vision for your fund is how big it is. So a lot of FemTech funds, there's about 6 of them, most of them around $10 million. And you can't make big checks and a lot of checks when you have a $10 million fund. And, there's, I, have helped co-found Coyote, and it's a $10 million fund. And some days people tell us, that's too small. You need to raise more. I'm not investing unless you raise more. And then other people are like 10 million. That's too big for you too. Like you gotta be smaller, So why 100 million? I love it. I'm like, why not? Like freaking, yeah, grow a pair of ovaries, y'all. 100 million euros, right? But what's your view on it?
Yeah, but you know what, Brittany, it's, I was talking to someone today. She's a really badass healthcare private equity investor, right? 100 mil is a small fund when you start looking at round sizes, right? I mean, Atomico just put a Series A 20 mil check in for fertility. It's like a insurance tech for fertility planning. I'm like, oh,
20% of the fund,
I'm like, okay, right. That's crazy, right? Because we've modestly sort of thought about 2.5 check, right, for 15%, and you're thinking that's 25 companies. That's 50% of the fund. Yeah. So we have 50% for doubling down. And surely, if you're investing in something, you want to be able to double down, right? And maintain your pro rata. That would be silly not to. So actually, it's not a big fund. It's 25 companies, but it sounds big. And the reason why it sounds big is I really believe that a lot of people are just trying to pass off sometimes and appease people by saying, oh, have a micro fund. And there's nothing wrong with micro funds. But at the same time, you do need bigger funds to start making a dent in the ecosystem.
That's right.
And if we are all working on that, so let's think of a 10 mil check. I mean, what are you putting in on average into a founder? What, 200K?
Yeah, like $100,000 check.
Yeah. Okay, right. Okay, so think about that, right? So you're going in at sort of pre-seed, right? Mm-hmm. And okay, in the UK, we have quite a lot of money at pre-seed. So family and friends is always a little bit of difficulty, especially if you don't come from those networks, right? But if you manage to do that, there's money at pre-seed in the UK. There's money at seed, right? There's money at Series A and beyond. The problem is there's no money between seed and Series A. Yeah. And there's only, I think, I remember reading somewhere, there's only a 17% chance of getting from seed to Series A for a normal company, let alone women's health, female founder, and anything else you want to wrap around that. So surely you want to go into the funding gap
100%.
and play big there. And that's where you make the most difference, because you know what? An extra price round between seed and Series A will give that rocket fuel, and they will get to those supersized Series A, and then they're ready to go. Yep. And that's why I think it's important. So yeah, look, all and I kudos to anyone who raises a fund, honestly, kudos to anyone, because it is one of the hardest things on this earth to do. It is soul it really
Woman
grips
who's
you.
a cancer survivor, autoimmune, like all of these things, and you're like, hardest thing.
Yeah, I don't want to put it in my career. Yeah. I mean, honestly, there were days, and for anyone out there, there are days when I say, why don't I just join an existing fund? I could just do that, right? It would make my life so much easier. But then I just think, you know what? I'm building this because I believe in what we're building, and I believe in the vision, and I know how many, like I said, I know how important it is to go in at that stage and help those kind of founders. But yeah, even for someone like me, sometimes we would think with all this, education and whatever experience, you still feel like you have your down days, right? And that's when I think self-care, having, some structure to your life, and actually believing in yourself is so important, and having good people around you. Because, when you're building anything new, it's always going to be difficult. It's, you're being a bit of a maverick, right? You're swimming against the tide. It's
That's
always
so
the
great
case.
that you know how hard it is to build something, because I think that makes the best investors. The worst investors are ones that like made their money from corporate and they think about $1 million marketing budgets, right? Like they're not very compassionate for the
Yeah,
people who are like stringing it together.
totally. And you know what? You're so right. Like, I mean, I would say like we've made a few, investments, and that's with our own money recently. And I must say, I love the founders we're investing in, and they seem to like us because, they get it, and we get it, what they're going through. I mean, honestly, unless you sat down on the floor at 2 a.m, cried your eyes out because the bloody printer doesn't work, or you can't make payroll, you don't know what it's like to be a founder. You just don't know. There were so many times in my own company where it's like, oh my God, how am I going to pay the rent? Oh my God, I haven't got any money coming in this month. Oh my God, like people are depending on me to make the right decisions, right? That is actually a really, you really have to grow up quickly in those situations. And, to actually be that person and be that support and actually keep a smile on your face while you're juggling 20 balls in the air, that's a skill. And so any founder who can do that, kudos to them. Kudos. It is not easy to build anything, be it, a fund, or be it a founder, or be it anything, right? So, and actually I would find working in a corporate really hard now, because I don't want to go to mindless meetings and put my, like when I was in a corporate, you had to put your jacket behind your chair just to show them you were in the office. I'm like, that's crazy.
Oh my
I,
God, like an attendance via your jacket on the chair. Oh my, yeah, I can't.
yeah, so, and just like I remember, like I was told by like my senior, so if you when you go into a partnership process, you need people to sponsor you, right? And I was told, like, could you not be less you? And I'm like, what does that mean? It's like, well, I'm wearing a red outfit and everyone else is wearing black, and I'm like, but does it really matter what I'm wearing, right? I mean, surely it matters that I know my skill set, I know my job, I know how to be a great attorney, and I can get clients in.
Yeah.
No, so you are judged as well. So yeah, it would be, I think every environment has its challenges, and it's important to know which challenges you want to fight. So for me, that wasn't worth fighting over, right?
Yeah. But
It just
for
wasn't.
women self-investing worth
Yeah, so exactly, right. So I just thought, you know what, I don't want to fight that. And it's so patriarchal. So, I mean, law, you're talking around when the Lehman's collapsed, it's like you have really bright people and you think, well, you just blew up the bloody world, right? And I'm sitting there as an attorney trying to unravel these derivative contracts, and no one even knows where the bloody margin call came from. And I'm thinking, how is that going to be my life going forward? And I've just had this horrible diagnosis. Surely that's a sign from the gods that this is not the way forward for me.
That's right.
But I think it takes a lot of bravery to walk away from something as well.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
That so building is really important, but also know when you need to pivot.
Yep. That's right.
And also know when you need to change and adapt and have different people around you, because there's no shame in that, right? I think that's also like our culture today. You know, you don't need to keep pushing against the door. Sometimes you just go left and the door opens, or go right and the door opens, you know? So that's also important.
Definitely. Well, you have had some really cool leads. So I've seen on your LinkedIn pictures of you on Downing Street having roundtables about women's health. You have a conference coming up in Scotland. So tell me about Downing Street, and then tell me about the Scottish government and this conference you're putting on.
Yeah, so the Downing Street is obviously lobbying with the government, because obviously women's health is super important. You know, you've got to put investment dollars into it, but you also need to change policy, and you also need to you need to have parity between men and women, and that involves working with governments. And so, you know, yeah, part of building a fund, I think, is also helping change the narrative, but you cannot change the narrative by just putting money into companies, right? You need to create legislation, regulation. It needs to be easier for these companies to thrive. And actually, you need to be able to create an environment and an ecosystem that allows them to thrive, right? So that's all the lobbying there. And to be honest, they are being helpful, right? So it's kind of funny, right? I didn't think they would be, but they are. And so, you know, we're in the process, I think, of getting a health minister now, women's health minister, which is, you know, really great. And Scotland already has a women's health minister, which is amazing, right? So Marie Todd, and, you know, we were asked by the Scottish government to put on a conference on FemTech, which is at the end of March, I think 25th and 26th of March, to basically showcase, you know, how great FemTech is, you know, how to get more students and founders into FemTech, to demonstrate that, you know, it is a $1 trillion market, you know, by, you know, your own research, you know, you're the one who's put that out there to show people, because everyone's kind of like saying, yeah, FemTech's so small, but actually it's not. It depends how you value it, and how you actually map it out. And, you know, this is a great way to show, you know, a younger generation, look, if you want to do something, if you want to create something, there's more women coming through STEM. Why don't you create solutions and something that really matters to you? And this is a huge TAM, and more investors will come into it. So yeah, part of the conference is really to encourage and excite younger founders and students to say, right, start thinking, what could you do? I mean, yeah, I mean, you could develop another fintech company, you know, I mean, but you also could maybe develop a cure for cancer, right? For endometriosis, which we don't have, for better screening for, I don't know, vulvar cancers and cervical cancers. I mean, there are so many things that you could do with that fine brain, right?
Yeah, my eyes can't roll any harder at pitch competitions when someone's up there pitching like a interior design app that, you know, uses augmented reality to figure out where to put your couch. And I'm like, you know, women are dying, right? We're all clear on this. Like, what? Why are we investing $1 million into an app that tells me if my curtain should be green or blue? I don't know.
Totally. And that's what I mean. There's so much money in our system, in our ecosystem, everywhere, you know, but that money needs to be channeled correctly. It needs to be funneled correctly. And why is it's not going into women's health? Why is it that why are we even having this conversation? Surely it's 101 that if, you know, so you know, $12 trillion TAM healthcare. Why is money not going from big pharma, especially? Why isn't it going from investors into women's health? It's 50% of the planet. I mean, it's like, you know, it's like a total, you know, and, you know, it doesn't matter your sexual you know, or you got kids and siblings, whatever. Ultimately, every single one of us owes our life to a woman. So surely we should respect that, right? I mean, that's just basic humanity for me.
Yeah, it's almost like a terrible comedy that we're finding ourselves in the middle of, and we're just like, this is a movie, right? Please wake me up. Priya, you are, you know, investing, looking at deals. You have this conference coming up. You have meetings on Downing Street. How can our listeners, if they're a founder fundraising and they're like, oh my gosh, I want Priya to look at my deck, or maybe they want to attend your conference, how do they learn more?
We have a website which has a lovely form where you can automatically submit your deck. So that's the first way, and someone will pick it up for sure. We are always looking for really great solutions. I mean, and we want to know what people are doing, right? That's really important, and we want to start that dialogue. And I think on the conference, there'll be more details up on our website. It's all going to go through Eventbrite. So, and there's also a streaming part of the conference as well, so people can either come in person to Scotland, and very welcome to do so. It's all free, or they're very welcome to stream them as well. So more of that information will be on the website as well in the coming days.
And for those listening, the website is ggventures.co.uk. You can also check the show notes. The hyperlink will be in there. Priya, this has been so much fun. We have 2 last questions that our listeners really love. The first one is, we have a lot of aspiring, you're talking about students, we have a ton of aspiring entrepreneurs that listen to our show, and they want to get into women's health. So what's an area in women's health that still needs innovating in your mind? Besides everything, because it's a trick question. So what's something in particular that's close to you in your heart that you wish somebody would create a solution for in women's health?
I think for me, it's always going to be the cancer tech, right? And I think how cancer and fertility interrelate. I mean, I think there's a lot of women who go through some really horrible situations, and then that compromises their fertility, right? I mean, surely we should be able to figure out, like, if you want to be a mom, that you can be a mom, right? And it just is crazy that there isn't more information, and more solutions and more tech-enabled solutions in this area. So that's personal to me. I would also love someone to figure out, how do you deal with autoimmune diseases? Because they're on the rise. I mean, women really are disproportionately affected. I mean, I'm still living with mine, like, 14 years now, right? And it's under control, but it has flare-ups, right? And it's connected to stress. And surely, that is an area which is, obviously more women are suffering, but we should try and be able to deal with that, right? And for me, it's not just science, it's our eating habits, our epigenetics, our DNA. There are so many, I think, levels and layers to go through to understand why women are suffering from things like autoimmune diseases so much, basically, and environment as well, actually. So that would be amazing, but that those things are complicated. But they are complicated. But I just think, given that there's such a steep rise in those areas, it would be great if people put energy and effort into that, and they need funding to do that, right?
Right, that's right. Our last question is, what do you think the FemTech industry as a whole needs the most right now in order to be successful?
Okay, I have a little bit of a controversial view on this, right? I'm a great believer in women helping women, but I think you need to bring men into the narrative, and especially white men into the narrative. So where the halls of power are, where the deep pockets are, you need to bring them into this conversation, because it's really hard to I think build something and change things if you don't have the existing status quo at least somewhat involved in this, right? And look, I'm not saying women shouldn't help each other. Of course they should, but it shouldn't be only you don't want to build a pseudo system which is like the one we have now, which is excluding people, right? Surely we want to build a more inclusive system. FemTech can be more, I think, can be inclusive. But I think, so part of that is, I think we need to encourage all sectors, all areas of society, all races, genders to be involved, right? And for us as well, I was looking at something this morning about fertility in the transgender and cisgender community, and I was just surprised that people are not looking into this stuff. I mean, surely solutions need to keep up with changes in society, right? And adaptations in society. And that's the heartbreaking thing, it's like COVID has done a great job in some ways of leveling up, right? And every one of us can get COVID, right? So we're all the same. No one's more special than someone else. But at the same time, femtech can be a little bit like, hey, I'm excluding everyone else and we're having this little conversation between us. But actually, you need to bring other people into that conversation, bring investment dollars and bring different people into the narrative, and actually encourage them and educate them to understand that women make great founders. They exit faster. They're more profitable, right? Women's health is a necessity for today's society. And that takes time.
Yeah.
And I think that for me is something that I think the femtech community can help with.
Absolutely. Priya, this has been a pleasure. You are a powerhouse to reckon with, and I cannot wait to see all the unicorns you invest in and be wildly successful in the UK, and one day going to Downing Street with you, eating a biscuit and some tea. That would be great.
Thank you, my dear. I always love hanging out with you.